Awesome. Guys, it's so good. Thank you guys for having me. I love working with students of all ages. So I've worked with college students, I've worked with adult learners, I've worked with kids as young as 6 years old. It's one of my favorite things to do is we're going to talk about how sort of that happened. I definitely never thought I'd be a teacher or connected to education in my life. And I'm just really happy anytime I get to engage. Please, I can go as long as you guys would like today. If anyone wants to talk more about any of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, has questions, curiosities, I'm available. Hit me up in an email, send me a message, whatever, or stay on this Zoom as long as I can stay on as long until whenever. I'm going to give you guys a really strange look at my twisty course that really started there, but it started at Towson when I was, 18, 19 years old. But I got to go back further to give it the full context. And I apologize. Right now in my presentation, I don't see my notes, so I've just got what you guys see on the screen. So we're gonna wing it, and I've done this a bunch, so that's okay. Let's start with one of my favorite quotes, which is attributed to Orson Welles. The enemy of art is the absence of limitations. And as I trace back through my 44 years of life, I cannot think of a more relevant quotation that has helped guide my sort of creativity and ambition. We're going to talk a little bit about this, but I found it always to be true. And I feel like every time that I've been met with some level of limitations, that's always the thing that sort of causes the friction that ignites a flame to create something cool. And in order to tell this story, I have to go back. When I say back, I mean way back to, let's start in 1987. That's a good time. What you're seeing here are images from 1987 to roughly 1990. This is young me opening up Christmas presents with Nintendo cartridges inside. There's me playing and beating Super Mario Brothers 3 for the first time. There's my Halloween costume where I actually was a Nintendo and I had a TV and I had a little tape player inside that was playing music. And then there's actually me doing some, I think that's programming. I'm not sure, really early programming, or at least learning basic typing, I'm not sure. But anyway, I was the Nintendo kid in my neighborhood. And when I say that, I had all the Fun Club news, I had all the Nintendo Power magazines, I had a pretty big library of games. I was so the Nintendo kid that the first time a girl I had a crush on called me on the phone, it was to ask me questions about Zelda 2, which, was a very weird flex to be able to, try and impress a girl with my Nintendo knowledge at 7 years old. But something was weird about how I played games versus how my friends played games. My friends played games the way everyone played games, very passively, like it was a fun way to sort of pass the time. Whereas to me, when I played a game, it was a very active thing. Like it prompted me to want to create things. I still remember the first time I put on the original Legend of Zelda, pressed the power button, and the music hit, right? And the music filled up the room on my little CRT TV, and it was mind blowing. Like I was 7 years old, and I wanted to become a musician because I heard that. I played Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and wanted to be, or Dragon Warrior, and it made me want to become a writer. It made me want to tell stories. This is years before I'm able to like pick up Tolkien and read, or even like follow Star Wars. And now I want to be a creative. I want to be a writer. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be a musician. I want to develop games. But we don't even get there because when we were kids at 7, there was no association with developers like there is now. Like now you see developers get on TikTok or YouTube or whatever and tell you what they're working on. Back then, games just sort of like appeared from the deities and, appeared in Toys R Us and we got to play with them. But eventually I would come to know that what I really wanted to do was make games. So one year, I decided that I was going to create my magnum opus. I designed all the game. I made all these sort of sketches and illustrations, concept art, but I also mapped out the levels on graph paper. I recorded music with a Casio keyboard and a tape deck, and I put it all in a box. And I put that box in Nintendo Power. There was a little letters to the editor section. I took the whole box and I addressed it. I wrote a little letter and it said, Dear Nintendo, please send me all the stuff I need to make my game, like a blank cartridge and stuff. Joe, age 8. And I put the box in the mail and I actually shipped it out at age 7 or 8 or however old I was. And I knew that someday, if I waited, this is me and my friend waiting in our mailbox, if I waited, The delivery truck was going to show up, and it was going to. I don't even know what we were expecting. Like space-age computers were going to show up, and we were going to like implicitly know how to use them. I think at one time I thought that the way that graphics worked were you drew a picture on a piece of paper and you like fed it into a machine, and the sprite popped up, and that's how graphics worked. Like I don't know what we were expecting, but we knew that our ideas were so good that Nintendo was going to send us what we needed to make our game. But of course, no, that didn't happen. Instead, we got a little letter. This isn't it. I wish I still had it, but it was like this one. And it basically said, hey, Joe, thanks so much for your interest. Stay in school, don't do drugs, and Nintendo of America cannot take unsolicited game ideas. I was crushed. My poor little 7-year-old heart, and those ideas were lost to time. They ended up in that storage shed that you see in that picture in my parents' backyard. And they ended up in a box. And the interesting thing to note, though, is that, like I said, when I'm 7 years old playing these games and creating these games, that was really my first foray into like being a creative. I told a story through a game I wanted to create. I made some art through a game I wanted to create. I made some music for a game I wanted to create. And I found that I had a real passion for creation like that. And so what ends up happening was I grow out of that, and those ideas kind of get lost at time a little bit, but I do become a filmmaker. I was never, but from one time I was 10 years old until now, I'm never without a camera in my hands. There I am with a giant clunky VHS camera. We used to make little movies around the neighborhood with my friends, and that's me as a cinematographer there, my first cinematography picture that I can remember. There's me playing music. I learned piano, guitar, bass, drums, whatever you can throw in front of me, trumpet, a little bit of cello. I started writing, and I started getting some side work with through my high school, and they set me up with the actual local paper, and I was writing for the paper. I was writing fiction, and if you notice at the bottom, I was still trying to create games. Now, there was no way to make games back then. There wasn't a program that you could make software. You had to literally code from scratch, and I didn't know how to do that. But there was a program for Macintosh, the old Mac SE, black and white computers, called HyperCard, and it was just a publishing program. It was just like a point and click presentation software, like what I'm doing right now. But I would make point and click adventure games because it's what I could do, and that was really my first foray into literally creating a gaming experience for people. As I grew, up from there, I started to do these things more professionally. I started to become a writer, and actually I started writing novels. I started, even as young as 18, I was cranking out novel-length stories. They weren't good. They were actually functionally terrible and derivative of everything I'd ever read. But I was getting the word counts in, and I was getting my brain sort of used to taking that impetus, that creative impetus, and putting it on page. And as I got older, I got better and better. And I learned from a Towson professor named Greg Siegel, actually was a fantastic professor. He passed away a couple of years ago, but I did get to tell him that how influential he was on both me and my wife. Helped me a lot with actually one of the stories you see on the screen, Beyond the Veil. Also became more of a journalist, got really into music journalism in Baltimore. I was writing for Music Monthly magazine and Shockwave magazine. I don't think either of them exist anymore, but somebody knows better, let me know. That would be awesome if they still did. And I became a filmmaker, so I started doing contract film work. Aside from this, I'm going to talk about coming to Towson for film school in a second, but I started doing a lot of film work, and I came to Towson to do film work to the EMF department when the EMF department did not even exist yet. It was like a pathway inside the mass communications. Little known factoid about me, I did not come to Towson to study film. I actually came to Towson to study journalism. That was my original major because I was doing a lot of writing. However, when I got I think what it was, and this is kind of ironic, I didn't realize consciously that you could actually have a career in filmmaking at the time. Like I knew it, I knew people did it, but I didn't know that for real, like people win the lottery too. I didn't know that it was a thing that you could pursue. And so when I got there, I was kind of disenchanted by the journalism program there. And it wasn't the program, it was just journalism in general. And what I thought it was in my head, and then what it turned out to be, it wasn't what interested me. I wanted to be more of a creative. And I was asked if I wanted to be grandfathered into the inaugural class of electronic media and film. And I said resoundingly, yes! Yes, I definitely did want to do that. That sounded awesome. And so I started studying film. And this is actually my 8mm film from that first year in class. I'm sure some of you guys have had to do this. I don't know if you guys are still using the crank Bolexes or not. This is our crank Bolex. Now, we had a great film that we had planned. Unfortunately, everything broke. every time we went to shoot. And the place that we got the gear was always closed, and we could never get it when we needed it. So we had to take all the broken footage and string it together into this weird mockumentary called Please Give Us a B. And that was our story. That was our student film. I'll never forget that. That was one of the most fun films that we worked on, as frustrating as it was. But the real thing is, I went on to become a musician, and I really, really got into music and the local music scene in Baltimore and the Mid-Atlantic. And there's a lot of places that I don't think exist anymore: Record Theater, Fletcher's, the Vault, 8x10 Club. All these places we used to play, and we sort of built a crowd around that and built sort of a scene around that. And music became my life. I was absolutely, for sure, going to become a professional musician. And even my film major degree just kind of waned by the wayside. And it got so good that we got to tour. We got to tour around the country. And the first tour that we went on was in that 1987 Suburban, towing the trailer with 4 guys and a dog over the course of a summer. That was kind of gross, but it was also awesome. It was a time that we got to be creative for an entire summer and actually monetize it and do it in a sort of semi-professionally. Victory Records was interested in us for a little while. We didn't like the terms of the contract. We never ended up signing. We were sure other ones were going to come. They didn't. But while we were on the tour van, something interesting happened. I got back into game development, and I started plunking around with games for our merch table. This one was called Steve the Dog Saves Rock and Roll. And you might recognize I was trying to go, like, all games had gone to 3D by this point, and retro aesthetic hadn't really come back into style, but I still loved it. So I started building these retro-like games that played kind of like retro games did that I remembered. This was where Steve the Dog was biting the heads off of pop punk and emo kids in Towson. And you can actually see, I think the rec room exists again, or it might be called something different, but you should recognize that right there. And of course the bridge looks a little bit different now, but you get the idea. And I really got into that. And in fact, my first time as a professional game developer was in the back of the tour van. Now, I will explain this very quickly. Touring in a van, even then, was incredibly expensive. Do the math. You got 4 guys and a dog. They have to eat every day. They have to sleep every day. You're on the road for 4 months at a time. It is brutal and expensive, and you don't make that much on merch or at shows. You have to try and keep up with stocking T-shirts and CDs, and oh my goodness, it's a nightmare when you're doing like an indie DIY tour like that. And we were doing fine, but we needed other ways to make personal money. So, like, our drummer used to do iron-on transferred T-shirts with stupid, basically meme sayings before memes were memes, and sell them on eBay for $40 a pop. He used to buy T-shirts for like $1, like really ratty white T-shirts. He would even print out the iron-on. They were like stretched out and everything. He would still sell them. That was his side hustle. Mine was, I started to do websites, Flash websites, and somebody asked me if I could do a Flash game. I didn't really have any experience in that. I was about to say I didn't, and they told me how much they were going to pay, and then I became an expert in Flash development. So I made my first Flash game. They were very happy with it. I got paid, and I'm like, wow, I'm a professional game developer. Who would have thought that? And that kind of started my interest churning again in game development, but still, I was going to be a musician. Put out a couple albums, got to play with bands like the Toadies and the Misfits, bands that we really liked, but eventually sort of hit the ceiling and crashed down to earth, came back to Baltimore and opened a production studio. What you see on the left is not my production studio, but that's me with Baltimore engineer who is my mentor, Drew Mazurik. That's at Sheffield Studios. And that sort of working with him prompted me to want to create my own studio. So I had a mobile studio. We worked out of a couple other people's studios. We had a video production facility. We started a film company. And we had access to a live room because we had the soundstage in our studio that we were using. And we also started to do things like web photos and game development. And we created a game centered around the local rock scene and artists overcoming corporate interests and things like that. And basically the whole concept was corporate radio turns the world into zombies and only the independent artists can save it. And that was our game called Touring in the Time of the Zombie Apocalypse. You can actually see Baltimore down there. That was where we were on tour in the game in that screenshot. Super fun. And what happened then was really unexpected. So we had the studio, and we'd have these young kids come around the studio and start peeking their heads in. And finally, we just started to invite them in and started to teach them stuff. And one of their parents turned out that the parent worked at a local school, and also tied into Guitar Center. So when at Guitar, I was manager of the pro audio department at Guitar Center as my day job at the time, and that got us to talking about whether or not I wanted to teach this stuff, because I knew game development and I knew audio production and I knew video and film production, and they were looking for somebody who was that sort of unicorn, and they asked if I wanted to teach, and I said, I guess that sounds kind of fun. I'm enjoying doing these workshops with kids, and I started teaching. Now, this was a very weird time in my life, because on the left there, you see me sort of the teacher yelling at a kid for not doing his homework on a Friday, and then that night, I'm the figurehead of anti-establishment of the local music scene on stage. It was a very sort of schizophrenic time in my life, but super fun. And what I didn't realize about myself was how much I was going to love a classroom and love teaching. That's what I was saying at the beginning. I found a real passion for working with students and sort of helping them and their creativity move forward. And I, after about 6 years of teaching at Frederick Douglass High School down in Baltimore City, I got headhunted by Ringling College of Art and Design, because I understood the bureaucracy of educational institution, but also I had a studio and I knew how to run a studio. So they hired me down as sort of videographer, part of their leadership team, motion designer, sort of all hats that had to do with video and their media department. And I wasn't going to go, but then it was the middle of March and it was freezing cold, and they started sending me pictures of the beaches, and they said, well, why don't you just come down for an interview on us? And that they got me. They got me with a picture that looked very similar to the one in the bottom left. I said, I could go for an interview, why not? And I ended up really liking the institution. What I didn't realize is it was basically a farm school for AAA game companies, for major film studios. And I got to actually sit down and interview and work with some of my heroes. Like, I got to sit and, interview Kevin Smith and pick his brain. And we got to talk about retro games and things like that. It was really fun. Wally Pfister, who was the cinematographer in all the Batman movies, we got to do a scene where we lit a scene with him, and John Lithgow and Forrest Whitaker and Etta Paquin came through, and Woody Harrelson came through. And it was really gratifying to sort of be meeting these people. I got to do studio tours and do interviews in new Nickelodeon studios and DreamWorks. Became really good friends with some people at DreamWorks. And it was all because of Ringling College. So it was a really great opportunity for me to grow in sort of with my contacts out in the world in professional media. And what I was lacking was I really wanted to get back into creative film. And I didn't really have a way in, because I was working in a marketing department. I wasn't doing creative film then. And so I started going to local meetups. I started to meet local filmmakers and local musicians. And one guy that sort of we kept clicking was a guy that you see in this picture here named Austin McKinley. And Austin McKinley, his main thing is he is a graphic novelist. He's a brilliant writer, but he's also a great illustrator, and he's a filmmaker as well. And he was working on a film called Caster's Blog, and he pitched it to me as, okay, how do we film this? We want to make a film, a feature-length film about a fictional blog. And I'm like, wow, dude, I don't know where to even start with that. So we started hammering it out, and he ended up hiring me on as the director of photography for that film. And we worked really closely together, and we had an instant, positive relationship. At this point, I bought, this is about when I bought a house in Florida. We got settled there. I was working full time at a great job. I was happy there. We knew. So we bought a house, and my parents said to me, hey, why don't you come get some of your childhood things out of storage and bring them down now that you've got a house down there? Which brings us back to the top of the story, because that led me out to the shed where I found the box. So that box that had all those game ideas that I created when I was an 8-year-old kid, that had prompted all of my future endeavors, my writing, my music, my filmmaking, my teaching, all the things that ended up becoming who I was as a person, were planted in that box. This was like opening a time capsule. Mind-blowing. I'd forgotten about most of this. And what's weird is most of it was destroyed. It was weather worn. The box was destroyed, but there was this binder, and inside the binder, most things were safe. So I still had some of those concepts and things like that. And then I got a good chuckle out of it. And I said to myself, man, that's funny. I'm a game developer now. Game development is different now than it was back then. I could have, if I was a kid now, I could make this game. And so my production partner says, well, you should make that game. And we laughed about it, and I said, yeah, that would be validating to my 8-year-old self. That would full circle. Sure, why not? So We spent just a Sunday afternoon bashing away, and we figured out, what platform we were going to use, and we built the game real quick. He did the art, something that kind of was in the lineage of what he saw in the art style, and I coded a cool engine, and we made the game, and we played it on his TV, and we're like, yay, we did it. That's the game. Does that scratch the itch? And I said, no, it doesn't, because you know what? It was always supposed to be a NES game. It was supposed to be playable on a real cartridge for a NES game, and it'll never be the same if it's not that. Haha. And he said, well, then that's what you should do. I said, what should I do? He said, you should make it an actual NES game that plays on a real cartridge that can play on real hardware. And I'm like, how do you even do that? Well, how does one even do that? And he said, I don't know, but it might make a really fun documentary to find out. So we set up shop. This was our first studio. This is my garage in Florida. You can see the main cabinet in the corner and the nice little futon couch there. This is the humble beginnings of what we were trying to do. And this is me learning 6502 assembly language, which is the same code they would have used back in 1985 to create a game. If you've never seen it, it looks like Sanskrit, but I promise it's not nearly as hard as it looks. But man, for me, there weren't a lot of resources, so it was tricky to sort of find this stuff, to find information. Eventually, I was able to get something on a screen that kind of resembled those ideas that I had running on an NES cartridge. That was far cry from an actual game, but it was like, oh my God, this can be done. And he said, okay, we're doing this. We're going to do a documentary about the creation of this project and about the homebrew scene of people that are still keeping this console alive and why they even care. Like, it's a 30-year-old console. That's an interesting documentary, he said. So we dove in. Now, let me tell you about some of the things that we experienced, because some of you guys are into like game development and stuff like that. So real quick, I usually don't do this part of the presentation, but I thought you guys would get a kick out of it. We wanted to design some characters, and there were some kind of tools that we could use, but this was our workflow at the very beginning, just to design some characters. So Austin would get into Photoshop and design some characters, and we had to keep the characters to 3 colors. Now, you'll notice each one of those characters individually is 3 colors. The problem is the entire sort of sheet that you're seeing here is, of course, a lot more than 3 colors. And we would have to reduce it down to 3 colors so that we could make it a CHR file, which is what we needed to be in the NES. So we would have to reduce it down to 3 colors. We'd have to think, okay, this is like the main, like the skin tone and the clothing and then the shadow color. And we would tone it to basically black RGB. So almost like an RGB alpha. And that's how we would get it to 3 colors. And we'd have to use a little creative thinking to think, okay, what should be the highlight color? What should be the shadow color? And then we would have to turn it into an 8-bit BMP, because that's all that the translator could understand, but it wouldn't let us export it as an 8-bit BMP, only a 24-bit BMP. So instead of that, we would have to save it with a legacy save for web export and save it as a PNG and reduce the colors to 4 colors. And then we would have to open the forced 4-color PNG into a new tab in Photoshop, and then we were allowed to save it as an 8-bit BMP, and then we could open it into the translator, and then we could finally export it as a CHR, which we could load into the game. And we had to do that every time we wanted to make a single pixel change to a graphic. That was the process. Moving on from that, this is a NES game screen. The first NES game screens that we programmed, this is how we did it. In hex code, just like this, by hand. And this is the color information for that screen. And what smart people might notice is it's a different amount of bytes. The tables are different sizes. How it works is kind of like this. If you look on the left, here's a more modern sort of tool. This isn't ours. This is a great free utility. What you're seeing on the right is what you're seeing on the left. You've got a tile set there, and you can see where all the tiles are placed, and the table on the right is what those tiles are, it's how they're aligned on the screen, except the color data sees 32 by 32 areas at a time in 16 by 16 pixel quadrants, and each bit pair correlates to which subpalette of the 4 subpalettes that you're using. If that sounds complicated, it really is. And to make it worse, our collision table was not based on 8 by 8 pixel tiles and not by 32 by 32 pixel tiles, but in 16 by 16 pixel tiles. So that table was a different size too. Now, if you were to look at the 3 tables that you see on the right, and I was to say, hey, I want to move the signpost 1 tile to the right. Think of the chaos that would invite to try and change the proper values to change the signpost if you're looking at the text data. That's how insane it was. It would take us all night to make 2 screens. So the first thing we did was we invented this little tool to make collisions. And what we could do is we could make a screen, and then we could load a snapshot, a screenshot of that screen into this little utility. And then we could overwrite values from 0 to 15, and it would color code them. And so what you're really seeing is you're seeing solid collisions that have an overlay of red right now. And you can't really tell, but the blue, there's actually an overlay over the water too. And that's a water type tile. And there's actually an overlay green in front of that sign if you look really closely. It's kind of hard to tell, but you could also put your mouse over and you could sort of see, and it said at the bottom. So this is our first little tool, and we were super happy with it. We're like, wow, this makes life a lot easier. So we started to make some more tools. We started to make a tool for making pixel art. We made it that would spit out the CHR data directly, and my artist didn't have to think about that whole crazy workflow. And we started to make things for animations and all these little like sub tools. And meanwhile, the documentary's going along. Documentary went way out of control, things that we never expected. I got to hang out with Piers Anthony, who that was bizarre. He's a fantasy novelist who was one of my inspirations as a kid for the ideas for that Mystic Searches game. We got to hang out in the IGN studios. We got to go met the guys from Shovel Knight. We got to hang out with David Sardi in his studio. He's a composer that has done tons of films. He worked on System of a Down albums and Rage Against the Machine albums and Red Hot Chili Peppers albums. And there at the bottom, Adam Goldberg, who is the showrunner and the creator of the Goldbergs on ABC, he came on as executive producer for the documentary because he loved the nerdy sort of spectacle that we were creating. In fact, he flew us out to LA and had us on set where we did our interview with him, and he actually included our game as it was at that point in the show. So if you watched season 2 of the show, I can't remember which, I think it's the last episode in season 2, one of the players is playing a Nintendo. You see him playing Nintendo, and you think he's playing Zelda or Mario or something like that. It flips back to the screen, and bam, our game's on the screen. And it goes, so it's like this false ephemera of a game that didn't exist back then showing up in the Goldbergs. It's only for like 1.4 seconds, but I was like, yes! National exposure! 1 million people saw, something I did on national television. It was a very cool thing. It's still there if you watch it on streaming or something like that. Very proud of that moment. I considered it a moment of personal victory. This was our trailer for the documentary.
I found these illustrations for a game that I created for the Nintendo Entertainment System when I was like 8 years old.
You're gonna try and make that game?
Shouldn't I?
So actually try and make it for a cartridge.
Could we make a compelling game experience despite the limitations?
It's gotta be doable.
We did take all your ideas and just go ahead and cut off the top 99%.
But this character we created, he's young, he's kind of a vagabond, he's a musician. How am I supposed to convey that in 16 pixels and 3 colors? He looks like a deranged Smurf.
We're gonna have such limited verbiage.
How much verbiage do we have then?
Worst case scenario, none. You get 2 square waves, a triangle wave, and a noise channel, and you have to create an emotive soundtrack.
Is this a prediction?
Is this a Game Boy 1 thing?
We gotta figure out what it takes to get this across the finish line.
So that was our big trailer. We were very excited with the way the film came out, and it became something way beyond what we had anticipated. It wasn't a film about making a video game. It became a film about what happens when you re-energize the ambitions that you have in your youth? What are the sort of unintended consequences in your life? And I think that's going to speak to everyone probably watching this who is a creative of any way. And that's what we found out. Anybody who had any sort of creative impetus to make things found some level of association with this. Super humbling. We ended up doing a nice little festival tour. We had a big premiere. We went to a bunch of colleges, a bunch of game festivals, and something weird happened. Yeah, it won a couple of awards. It was very gratifying. Something really weird happened. And that is, every time we showed up, we would sit there and we'd talk about the movie and we'd show the game that was still almost done. And then people would ask how we made it, and we'd start showing them the tools. And everyone would ask everywhere we went, how do I get those tools? And the answer was, well, I don't know. You know, it would only help us. It only creates our game. But enough people asked us that we finally said, maybe we should look into building those tools. And so we said, could we break apart our Mystic Search's screen tool and game engine and make it so that it could do more than just our game? Could we make it so that it could make a platform game and make all kinds of stuff? And so we said, let's back up. How much would it take for us to break? Let's hire our front end developer. I'll do some more back end work. It'll cost us, I don't know, a couple months worth of work. Let's put an even number out. Let's take $30,000. Let's put this up on crowdfunding. If we raise it, we'll make it. If not, we won't. And we put together some design documents. We showed what we were capable of. We launched on crowdfunding, and this is the pitch.
Man, I wish you could make a Nintendo game. Yeah, our game would be totally wicked. Whoa!
Joe! Austin!
Who are you?
We're you! From the future! 30 years in the future! We came to bring you Nest Maker, our tool to create brand new cartridge-based, hardware-playable NES games.
Wouldn't that take a lot of computer programming?
No, young Joe, that's the best part! We explain it all on this VHS tape!
Design your hero, create your monsters, build your world, tell your story on real NES hardware with an intuitive front-end interface.
It's amazing. It's easy.
I'll get past that. The main idea was that we were trying to raise $30,000 and it hit $250,000 within a month. So all of a sudden we realized, okay, we actually have something that we didn't realize there was that big of a community that was so interested in doing this. Now, we didn't go out and buy new sports cars. A lot of this went into hardware deliverables and things like that. But the real number was, wow, 2,500 people pledged to get this kit. And that slowly grew over time to over 10,000 people around the world using our software tools to make games. We were able to start up our first studio. So in Sarasota, Florida, in Gulfgate, ironically, the absolute epicenter for the hurricane that just hit. This was our first studio. And we had a classroom. We had a place where me and Austin sort of did our creative work with a small recording studio. And he had his, he called it his fishbowl, where he could look out over the city and he could actually do his comic illustration. And then we had a soundstage that we had built, what you're seeing in the bottom right there. That's our 80s basement set. And so we built a full-on 80s basement set with all kinds of cool props and stuff like that. And we did a whole bunch of web series stuff from there. And we were about to really launch this thing in a high gear with our classroom. We held one class on January 27th of 2020. And that was the last one. So we're going to come back to that in a second. But what we did see with our 10,000 user base was people started creating games, selling games, crowdfunding games, all within our user community. Games are now being published for Steam and Switch and Xbox and things like that using these tools. And it became really clear, this is not homebrew. That's not what that is. Homebrew with the beer connotation, you're making a bunch of homemade beers for your friends or for a party or for a wedding or something like that. That's homebrew, right? If you are making a beer and you are selling it to local distributors, that's an independent brewer, right? And that's where the name homebrew derives from when it comes to games. And a homebrewer is making games for, friends and family and the novelty of, can I do this? We have independent studios that are creating games and actually using this as their deliverable rather than for the Xbox or the iPhone or whatever. This is just an alternative pathway. And that's what we found out. We were super excited to find that out. We started doing an awards show. So our award show at first was just to celebrate the community. It was dumb. It was shtick. We did it on the green screen at Ringling College of Art and Design. We put all the characters from all the games in the audience, and it was shtick. It was silly. It was dumb. 4 years later, Midwest Gaming Classic, which is one of the biggest retro gaming events in the country, invited us to actually do a real award show at their event. So it went from a silly novelty to an actual thing in just a couple of years. And I'll skip this unless we want to come back to it. The game Mystic Origins came out. Why it's Mystic Origins instead of Mystic Searches? Well, we got to a point where we were creating the game and we looked back and we said, man, imagine if we had all these tools when we had started this project. Think of how much more this game could have been. Oh my goodness. And Austin said to me, well, why can't we? Why don't we truncate this game? Why don't we cauterize it at the edges, change the narrative a little bit? We'll make it a prequel. And so that's what happened. The game that's almost done in the documentary became Mystic Origins while we continued work on Mystic Searches. Now Mystic Searches has grown into its own institution. We've got a really thick lookbook and a very thick lore. Novelizations. We've got 8 novels length planned out. We've got a comic series, a vinyl which has the chiptune on one side and the full orchestration on the other side. We've got the special edition cards, which are these sexy wood cartridges. And we've gotten some great write-ups in some great publications about Nestmaker, about Mystic Searches, about what the development process has been like, about this story that I'm telling you now. So what ended up happening was we had our first class. This is what I was saying a minute ago. COVID-19 happened. We could no longer make it of staying in the studio because the whole idea of having the studio was to invite people in the studio and do collaborative work and stuff like that. We could do everything we needed to do from home. Austin ended up moving to Canada for a while. I ended up moving up to Providence, Rhode Island because I missed the North. Raising kids, schools are better up here, so we decided to sort of move back up north. Had 2 kids, and while we were up here, I took a job with M Audio, which is a company that's owned by In Music. If you guys do any kind of music production, you probably know the name. And they were launching their new M Game line, which was a game streaming hardware. You could get this now. I helped develop the software and finalize the hardware for this. They knew that I had done this product work with Nestmaker and also that I had this background in music. It was great to be connected to music for a little while. Then I got involved with a company called Project Frontier, which is a bunch of people from Epic Games that left Fortnite Creative. One of them had written the very first code in Unreal Engine 4 to give you an idea of who these people were. It's a great company. It's called Omni Creator Products. They're launching a new sandbox RPG called Project Frontier. They wanted somebody to do sort of not community management, but it's more of a developer relations because since it is a sandbox engine, they needed somebody who spoke code, but also knew how to talk to people, understood the marketing, but also understood the engineers. And so I was that sort of go-between because that's what I've been doing with Nestmaker for the last decade. While I was doing that, I did some workshops at New England Institute of Tech, and I taught students how to make Nest games. We did a lot in code. We did a lot with Nestmaker. And I remembered how much I missed teaching. And that it was so every day when I came home, if I had a good day at OCP, whatever, but if I had a good day teaching, I was on cloud 9. And I'm just like, man, I got to get back into a classroom, but there wasn't really the right situation. So I said, forget it. I got an idea. I'll open my own space. So I opened a new studio in just outside Providence, Rhode Island, right down the street. I could ride a bike to the space. Right above the local bookstore. And I started teaching Nest development as summer camps, night workshops for kids. And it ended up doing so well that Bitmass Games was born, and I decided to jump ship on all other professional pursuits. And this is what I'm doing full time now. I'm working on media production during the day where I'm editing film or writing novels or making games or whatever the sort of wind takes me. And then by night, I'm teaching game development. And hopefully I want to move into teaching video editing, audio production, things like that too, once we get a little bit bigger of a space. The space doesn't have that sort of live room for it. These are some of my students. This has been honestly the greatest experience to be able to do this with these kids. They're awesome. They're brilliant. And it's the most amazing thing to see a 7-year-old child who is 40 years removed from the relevance of the Nintendo Entertainment System, their face explode into light when they see their cartridge that they made go in and they press the power button and something they made shows up on the CRT. You wouldn't think they would have any appreciation for that, but they do, and it's weird and it's awesome. So just to sort of close this out before Q&A, this is where Mystic Searches stands right now compared to where it started with these original illustrations. Here's a quick look at a trailer. And so that was actually part of the orchestration of the main themes, various themes from Marinda, which is the soundtrack on that vinyl that I showed you guys earlier. That's it for my presentation. I know it was kind of a lot of chatter, so I would love to talk to you guys. And there's so much more to talk about all this, and I'd love to know what you wanted to know a little bit more about. So let me stop sharing my screen here. Let's see, stop share. Stop share. Awesome.
Yeah, so Joe, first, I just want to thank you. That was an amazing presentation. I wrote down a few questions that I have, but I just want to open it up to the students who are here. And it looks like we already have one person. It looks like Max, you have your hand raised. Why don't you go ahead and get us started with the Q&A?
Can you hear me?
I hear you, Max. Yeah.
So here's a question. Well, so when I use Unreal or Godot for game design, so I find that so much has been done for me in these game engines that I feel like I'm using a collection of glorified level editors, and it made me realize that my passion for game development doesn't come from a place of wanting to do what the game industry does. It comes from wanting to do what was done 25 years ago. Oh, and then I realized that I want to do avant-garde game development because I'm dissatisfied with the status quo. How do I make a game engine?
Backing up a little bit from that, we had the benefit of we're working on an engine that what you need to make a NES game really is Notepad, an assembler, and an emulator. That's what you need to make a NES game. So we built our first engine in Notepad, without anything else. And what we ended up doing was when you see NES Maker, you see something that it started as we build these modules, right? So like you're going to make a Pac-Man like game, there's a module for it. But the thing is, all the scripts are exposed. So if you wanted to use NestMaker as an asset organizer to like create your graphics and then code completely from scratch and build from scratch, you can do that. That was kind of the design. So if my physics engine sucks, and it does because it's very unoptimized, you could write a better one and you could write a more optimized one. You have the ability to learn how it works and get in. But the thing is, that's the part that scares most people away because they can just go to GameMaker or Unity or Godot and they don't have to do all that and they can still see their vision come to life. What we wanted to do is we wanted to bring NES development and these sort of retro game development into the modern era where somebody who's a musician or an artist who could make a game in GameMaker, now they could make a game for the NES too, using the same principles. But also for the hardcore programmers who want to make their own engine, they can get under the hood and start with zero and build an entire engine the same way you would with a Notepad and an assembler, just with a little help and organization from the software. Building an engine from how to program. How to program, computer science, Python. Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's all about platform that you want the game to be on. So there's a lot of tutorials on how to build a game engine, and it all depends on like how you're compiling or assembling the game at the end and what you want the output to actually be. Is it a PC-based game, a Linux game, or whatever? But yeah, that's a great ambition. I love that.
Yeah, what I've noticed for a lot of the game design stuff I want to do is I'm interested in how games from the late 90s and early 2000s use graphic styles that optimize that optimized it for lower end performance. But to do those same tech, I'm thinking Z buffering in PS1 games or vertex shading in PS2 games, and to those optimization techniques aren't even possible without complicating things in modern game engines. So they're not even used as so I can't even use them if I want to.
Correct. Yeah. Awesome, man. It looks like Isaiah. It looks like you're wanted to ask a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, Isaiah. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? First of all, great presentation. Loved it. Very, very inspirational, very educational.
Thanks.
The question I want to ask is, I do feel like I have a passion for working in the video game industry.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, development wise, I hate coding. I can't do it. I would like rather do anything else. So I guess
you need to come take my class. I make it fun. Ask my 7-year-olds.
Oh, really?
Sure.
But I wanted to ask, like, what kind of like other like careers, I would say, like whether it's
Yeah,
like
oh my God.
advertising or marketing
Oh, sure.
or anything like that.
Yeah, no, games are such a force right now that like it's bigger than Hollywood. So anything that you do, you could be a lawyer and go work in video games. You know, you could be a doctor and go work in video games. It doesn't matter. Like you can literally be any pursuit. I would suggest finding a few, you know, maybe you're a generalist. Maybe you're somebody who or maybe you're a narrative developer, or maybe you are a game tester, you're a QA person. Maybe you're, on that side. Maybe you're on the legal side of games. You know, I mean, there's so many facets of it. So, like, being adjacent to games is still in games in this age. There are these giant conglomerate operations. My professional, if you don't want to count my own independent studio, my professional game experience was as a developer relations manager, where I basically communicated between the players and the engineers, and I was like the go-between, kind of a mascot, kind of a PR guy, but also kind of somebody who understood the code enough that I could speak about. I didn't have to code anything, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of careers in it as well. Yeah.
Joe, quick follow-up question on that. For an entry-level position, and definitely more on the creative side, what skills in EMF would carry over well versus like maybe one or two skills that we should, pick up on the way?
I'm a weird person to ask that, right?
On our resume the first year, but what should we learn as early as possible?
Yeah. Everyone should get their hands on logic of some kind. Everyone should understand what an engineer goes through. That does not mean you've got to become a C# expert, but you should know how a basic game engine works. You should know what a game loop is. You should know, like, some of these basic terms and things like that absolutely should be fundamental to anyone, even if you're doing the law stuff in game for a game development company. Like, even if you're doing narrative development, you still kind of know that stuff. You should know about gray boxing. One of the most important things that I teach my students is about gray boxing. And if you guys haven't talked about what gray boxing is, let's say you start a new game and you've got 50 people on your team. You've got a whole bunch of artists and a whole bunch of programmers and some narrative developers and some sound designers and all these different people, right? And we're like, okay, we got a great idea. Go. What do the engineers have to see their work? Nothing. They cannot actually see any result of what they're doing. So what will end up happening is they'll build a gray box. And so they'll build gray box assets, which are simple assets, cubes, spheres, whatever. But it allows them to sort of design levels or get the physics engine working or whatever, while the artists start making the real art, right? So gray boxing is a huge skill, and being able to show that you can create, I think it's more important to show that you can create a simple gray boxed environment in a modern game engine than making a fully polished like 3D cutscene or something like that, unless you're going for very specialized function. Mm-hmm. I tend to like generalists and generalist work. I may be in the minority though. I don't know. It kind of ebbs and it kind of swings back and forth whether generalists are very in demand or very frowned upon. Like, no, we want somebody who only does C# programming in this engine, So it kind of is all over the place. But EMF, you've got to be able to sell your ideas. So being good at video, being good at motion design is super important. I would say things as simple as public speaking, as being able to make sure that you can record good audio and things like that. These are skills that definitely EMF is helpful for understanding aesthetics, understanding how to work towards a demographic, have a demographic in mind when you start a creative project. I do that even with my 7-year-olds. Like we had to do a Halloween game for the spooky stroll at the elementary school. And I had high school kids who were like, why are we making this game? I'm like, no, you're not making it for you. You're making it for a demographic, and you need to think about that demographic. I think all those are soft skills that are important in the EMF department. I think everyone should have experience, even if they don't do it more than once. They know how to design a 2D piece of art. They know how to design a 3D piece of art. They know how to make a level in a pre-existing game engine. They've done some small amount of coding. Anyone who's going to be in games should have done all of those things, even if they're doing videos or something like that. I'd love to. I see a whole bunch of questions in the chat. I just opened the chat, so for those of you who have responded in the chat, I apologize. I didn't see the chat till just now. Let's see. What do you do when people reduce the retro game appeal to just nostalgia? Well, that's a great question. The thing is I've watched brand new games for the Nintendo Entertainment System have $80,000 Kickstarters, and that's not nostalgia. That's a new game. So maybe it is, but we've seen a lot more than that. We've seen that there's actually something to the aesthetic that young kids are attracted to just as much as old people, even if they didn't grow up with it. It's a lot like vinyl coming back. Oh, vinyl's just nostalgia, except the 17-year-old kid has a record collection. Can't explain it with nostalgia. So, how does that work? And there's a definitely a emotional relationship to the physical media, and that's part of it, like actually holding it in your hand and saying, this thing is mine. It's not on the cloud, and it's not going to evaporate. It's not going to disappear when some website goes down. This thing I'm holding is mine, and if I take care of it, it's always going to be my artifact of this time and space. I think that has a lot to do with it, and I could honestly go on forever about that. Definitely a good question, though. Hope that answers a little bit. Are we still using Game Maker Studio? I haven't used it in a while, but I really like Game Maker. I thought it was, when I taught high school, I taught Game Maker almost exclusively. I taught Unity as well, but I taught Game Maker almost exclusively because I really loved how it taught the logic. And what was really funny was, quick Game Maker aside, we started with Game Maker, and the first semester I did it, I started to teach them GML coding, and the students had a conniption. Minds exploded. I can't do this. I can never do game. I don't want to do game design anymore. I want to trade classes. I want to go into dance. Whatever it was, they were just so upset that they didn't want to do, because we had to do coding. So the next semester I started with the drag and drop stuff. And then we went from the drag and drop stuff to the coding, and the kids said, why didn't we start with this? This is so much easier. So the logic is the important thing that I think Game Maker teaches, and I thought that was an awesome thing, and the way it's presented is really easy for students to understand. Good question. Creative professional doing different things in a world that tells you niche down. I kind of just talked about this a little bit. Yeah, for sure. It is a very frustrating thing. Some days I really struggle with it myself. I had a friend who just won an Emmy, and I look at him and I'm like, if I had just become a film editor, I would have went out to LA with him, and I would be winning Emmys. I should have done that. I look at Mike Flanagan. I mean, oh my God, I graduated like next to this guy, and he is doing the most phenomenal work. And I'm like, man, that's this. He's like all of his IPs, the Christopher Pike stuff, the Dark Tower stuff that he's connected to. Also, that's the stuff that we talked about back in the day. Like, I could be doing that. And so I look at my life and I say the same thing. Maybe I should have focused on one thing. And then every day I work with the students, and we're learning music production, we're learning video, we're learning film, we're learning these things. I feel very gratified, like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, where I'm supposed to be doing it, and having this sort of generalist experience. There's some employers that don't like that, but for me, when I have a creative idea, it might be geared towards a certain medium. Like, I might have an idea that only works as an album. Like, that's the only way I can get that emotive state out is through music. And so I'm sitting down at a piano, and that's very different than the impetus that makes me sit down to tell a story in fiction or to make a game. So I like that I have those skills, and I understand why people don't. So I understand that, the world's perspective, and maybe it wasn't the smartest career choice on my part, but I feel like I'm doing okay. Talking about and criticizing games is easy. Making games is hard. Absolutely, for sure. That's true with all medium, right? With films too. And I'm guilty of it. I am a film snob. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I agree. Anybody who makes a film, it's hard. Anyone who makes a game, it's hard. Making music for games. What's your process for creating chiptune music? We actually use FamiTracker. The newest version of our tool is going to come with its own internal thing, but FamiTracker. What's weird about FamiTracker is if you're used to a music software like Logic or I don't know, Fruity Loops or any of these other sort of step sequencers or whatever it is that you use, this is not like that. It's like programming a spreadsheet. It's really bizarre. And at first it took all the creative juice out of it and I hated it. Now I love it. Like I love working in that medium. I've learned how to adapt sort of what's going on in my mind. I'm used to, sitting down at a piano and playing what I'm emotively feeling. And that's sort of my process. So when I have to like click through and pick options and oh my God, I hated it. And now it's just a different medium. It's just a different way of making it. So if you want to make chiptunes, FamiTracker is still your sort of best bet, is learning how to do that with a little MIDI keyboard. What is your favorite part about creating games and how many people were working together? What's my favorite part about making games? I love the creative process in general. I love ideating. I actually really like coding, but I say that on today because I had a success. Tomorrow I might say how much I hate coding. Today I was you're only in one of two states when you're coding. You're the genius, smartest man alive, wizard of code, or you're helpless and you'll never figure it out and you suck. So you're only ever one of two extremes. Today I feel like I love coding. Tomorrow I might not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you meant by how many people were working together on Mystic Searches. We started with a lot of people, but really it's me. I have a couple contract artists that, every once in a while I'm like, oh man, I really need to do whatever. I usually touch it up myself if it's something small. If it's something big, I have somebody I call. I did all the music. So at this point it's whittled down to mostly just me and then people that are just helping spread the word about it really at this point. I am still in Rhode Island. I'm in the Providence area. If you're going to be in Providence in Thanksgiving, absolutely come by the studio. I don't know if I'll be having classes that week, but you're welcome to come by the studio, make an appointment with me, get in touch. I would love to meet anybody who's coming through the Providence area, and you can come see my little crazy nest maker studio. Do I make my kids work as a team on a single game or as individual assignments? Good question. They always work as individuals on their first project. They always have to learn the fundamentals of the tool. By the end of the first 2-month project, they understand the basics of the game. On the second project is when I let them start to team up if they can handle it. If not, I break them back apart. So right now, this group, I've got a great group of basically 9 to 11-year-olds that are working as teams. When I did that college workshop at New England Institute of Tech, that was all team-based, but we all made a game first. We learned the engine first, everybody individually. And that also helped people like learn their strengths and their weaknesses. I really like coding. I didn't know that about myself. Cool, I'll be the programmer. Some didn't know that. And some people who think they don't like programming maybe haven't learned the right language because every programming language is different. So don't count yourself out if you want to do programming, but just think you weren't good at it. Sometimes it just takes literally the right teacher or the right method of instruction and it just clicks. And the best way to learn programming, for those of you guys who are trying to learn, it's the same way as the best way to learn a language. The best way to learn Spanish is not Duolingo. The best way to learn Spanish is get airdropped into Mexico. You're going to learn how to ask where the bathroom is real quick. You're going to learn how to ask directions real quick. You'll be speaking Spanish in a week. Same thing with code. You want to get good at code? Airdrop yourself into writing code. It's going to be painful, and all of a sudden it's just going to start clicking.
Programming wa nihongo de nanto imasu ka?
I'm sorry?
Programming.
I couldn't hear that.
De nanto imasu ka?
Yeah, no, I missed it. Sorry. Drop me right in, but it's going to take me at least a week to...
It says, how do you say programming in Japanese?
There you go. Let's see.
Languages. I love it.
What do I think my child self would think of what I've created and where you are now? My childhood self fancied himself a rock star and always had the vision of being on stage in front of, a couple thousand people. That happened. My childhood self wanted to make films. I've made award-winning documentaries now. That happened. My childhood self wanted to make games. I'm actually working in games. And then when I told him my main job is teacher, he'd be like, what is wrong with you? So I don't know. I feel like that's what would happen. He'd be very happy with what I've achieved and said, you old man, now you're a teacher. I don't like that. Go do something cool again. And ironically, my son is now 7. So my son is the age I was when I started this whole journey. And so that's what he says to me. So I have like this mirror of what I was like when I was 7 right now. It's kind of fun. This is a fun question. but what is your current video game to play? I'm always open to recommendations. Nothing that's going to be exciting to you at this point because we're a few years past it, but I just played Breath of the Wild again through for the second time. Absolutely love that game. I played it again through because my son wanted to see it and wanted to play it, and he's playing his own sort of thing, and then I got back into it. I was like, oh, I gotta play it again. So I played it again. Love it. Think it's brilliant. That's the game I'm playing, and I got into the Xenoblade games too, and I don't love them, but I do love them. I can't put them down. Like I'm like, oh, this narrative, it's not my kind of thing. I'm not really into the sort of anime thing, and then like I get so sucked in, and I can't stop playing it, and so that was an interesting. Went through all 3 of them and all the DLCs. So for games that I didn't really like that much, I guess I must have liked them a lot. I don't know. Favorite NES game? Ooh. It's like asking your favorite color. Like, it depends on the context, I guess. Like, what's your favorite color to wear? What's your favorite color to paint on your walls? Might be a different question. What's my favorite NES game? Star Tropics. A lot of people, you said Star Tropics, Max. A lot of people have compared Mystic Searches to Star Tropics. If you watch that trailer back, you'll see. I never played Star Tropics as a kid, but I have as an adult, and I totally see that, and I think that's really flattering. Legend of Zelda, the original, was the game that opened my eyes to what video games could be. So I'll always put that as one of the top. I don't know if it's my favorite NES game, but like, was probably the most influential, at least. Awesome questions, guys. Kids are getting into.
We have access to the slides and and your contact info.
Yeah. I'm gonna just share it in the chat.
The chat.
Yep, I can. The last slide had my contact info, but I can share. You guys can get in touch with me here, and if anyone wants to reach out directly, I have no problem. This is literally my personal email. Feel free to reach out, say hello. That's what you'll see on the top. The first email there is just a big repository of dumb stuff I've done, and New Baby Heroes is the Nest Maker site and links out to all things related to that. And then my email. Feel free to get in touch for sure.
Yeah, and I can help facilitate all that stuff too. So Joe, in your presentation, you mentioned you were hosting a game show. You were awarding games and game makers. Which games won and why? And to kind of make this a little broader, from a story or aesthetic standpoint, how are retro games still surprising you?
Yeah, for sure. So we've done this for 4 years now. So every year we have a different theme, and we run it kind of like a 6-week game jam. So it's got a theme, it's got some constraints, it's got some it's not meant to be competitive, it's meant to be collaborative, but part of the fun is that we're all in a friendly competition. We try to have some cool awards. Like last year was a $3,000 prize. Like there was actually some decent awards, publishing prospects, things like that. I guess the thing that surprises me is there are always things that surprise me, like people can do with the NES. Mostly it's like, oh, wow, I'm surprised you got it to do that impressive of graphics, or wow, But what I've been most impressed about was somebody who takes our engine that I know so well in and out, and then spits back something that I'm like, I have no idea how you did that. Like, I have no idea how you did that thing. And we have an award called the Wombat Award, and that's the only one that we judge. Everyone else is an industry leader in some way, somebody that's in the actual industry. But we judge the Wombat, and it's exactly for that category. Like, we looked at that and we're like, dude, I don't. It's not that this is that crazy, but like, I don't know how you did that with what I created. Like last year we had somebody who made a game. It's just a sandbox game where you're playing with Legos. You just build stuff with Legos. And I'm trying to think like, what module of ours did even use to make that? I can't even fathom. We have nothing like that. Somebody else built we saw a 3D World Runner game that plays like 3D World Runner, and we don't have any 3D modules for that. And it's faux 3D. It's not real 3D. It's sprites that are getting bigger as they're coming to the screen. We saw a Rad Racer style game that's called EV Cruising. It's Rad Racer but electric vehicles, and they've got a screen where you're selecting what song you want to listen to and what vehicle, and then it's Rad Racer. And again, I'm like, and they did it within 6 weeks, and I'm like, I have no idea. I can guess, like I can try and work it out, but I don't know how you did that. And so that's the kind of stuff that always impresses me. We've had 30 some odd years of gaming vernacular since the NES is out. So we've seen just about everything that can be done, but watching how people create characters and create narrative that is still compelling, or experiences that are still compelling despite having seen it all, like that's what impresses me. It's just like film, right? Like we've seen everything there is to see in movies. You know, how are we going to make, you know, we can't possibly make another story set in Gotham interesting. And then the Penguin, who knew? Like, this is a brilliant show, right? Like, we've seen it all before, but how can we use the conventions of the medium to continue to create interesting things within that medium through character, through narrative, through thematic exploration? And so I think, you know, what happens, here's a interesting answer for you. The NES was a boys' toy for suburban little white boys. Like that's who it was for. That's who it was marketed for. That was the major demographic they were shooting for. That's who was buying the systems on Christmas morning. The parents for their kids. Parents didn't even understand it. Like that was the reality. Okay, so what happens when the creative tools to develop for that platform are put in the hands of people representing other demographics? What changes in the language that's spoken in that same medium? That's fascinating, and we've seen that happen when different demographics sort of get their hands on it. How that changes the language and the aesthetic, and that's always been really interesting. Let's see, we got some more questions. Mixed group of game developers and animators. The game engine that continues to surprise me is the Doom 200. Oh, we were just talking about that at the convention I went to, like seeing Doom on a pregnancy test and seeing Doom on, oh yeah, the new Nintendo clock, that stupid thing. Doom can run on that, because of course it can. You know, Doom can run on my watch and calculator. That's hilarious, yeah.
So I know we're short on time. I'll ask maybe just two more questions. I'm going to try to bring this closer to the curriculum in the class. So,
yeah.
So as creatives, why would we choose to tell a story through a video game as opposed to a short film or a song or a poem?
Yeah. So I think that video game is the most intimate form of art that there is. Number one, it encompasses all other forms of art. You're telling narrative, you've got music, you've got visuals. Not all games do, but generally you're speaking, you've got all the other art forms embedded within it. But more important than that, you make the player the avatar. So this is an interesting thing that I've been fascinated with for 20 years now. When you are playing most games, this isn't all games, when you're playing most games, when Link beats the boss, it's not Link's accomplishment. It's your accomplishment. When Frodo delivers the ring to Mordor, Frodo delivered the ring to Mordor. You were accompanying him. When Link beats the Gleeok, you beat the Gleeok. You did that. You defeated that. That was your victory. And that's always been very fascinating to me in the way that you empathetically resonate with the experience in a game more than you would any other medium, right? You're always along for the ride with any other medium, but with games, you are the active participant. It forces you into a mode of empathy for the characters, for their struggle, for that environment. Sometimes it's very light, and that's why games sometimes aren't as emotionally resonant as like a deep film. But it does give you that personal connection. It allows you to experience things as, you know, other people, other, you know, experiences you can never have, rather than just being sort of a bystander along with the characters. And I think that's one of the things that makes games a really unique medium to create in.
It's a great answer. And then my last question before we wrap this up, how can we get involved with NES Maker, Bitmask today? So most of us are based in Towson. I know we're doing this through Zoom, but are there opportunities available online?
Yeah, so the new8bitheroes.com, you can get a copy of the license. It's $36 for a commercial license. That covers like us going to conventions and keeping this website alive. This is not a giant corporate business. It's less than the price of a single video game, but it helps us just survive. And so you can get that now, and there's tutorials online now. There's forums, there's user groups, all kinds of stuff like that. I would absolutely love to teach a course in NES development at Towson University virtually. That would be the most amazing thing someday. Conversation that I'd love to continue to have. And retro game development in general. But also, I've also been thinking about, we've had a couple of offers about franchising locations for Bitmask Games. And Bitmask Games is not just for kids. We have adult classes too. I'd love to work with college students. One of the places I'm personally thinking of is in the general Towson area, because I still have friends in Towson and Baltimore and things like that. So I've got sort of a support structure there to help help me get it off the ground. So I've been thinking about that, and that might be another way. If there's anyone who's really interested in this as a thing, please get in touch, just because those are conversations being had now. And I like to work directly with people. I see people. Hi. I see a whole bunch of people. Hi in the middle. That is the CGDA students. Hi, awesome. It's good to see you. But yeah, anybody who wants to get involved in any way, feel free to reach out with me and let me know how they want to get involved, and I'd love to have them involved somehow. I would actually love to do another campus visit and actually do more of these talks in person. I would be happy to do a showing of the film there. I did a couple years. I did in 2017. We were on the film tour. We did a showing in the EMF department, but Van Bachlen was closed, so we had to do it like in a class. I would love to do the grandeur of the auditorium and have a Q&A. But yeah, anyone who wants to reach out to coordinate more, if you want to get Nestmaker involved at Towson, that'd be awesome. Or just individually, people who want to start, making retro games and learning basically finding their new obsession. Just let me know, and I can get you started.
Perfect. Well, we're right at time. Let me close by just thanking you, Joe. Great presentation. Thank you for answering our questions. We really appreciate it. Hope to see you again soon. I love the idea of teaching a full-blown class on NES games. How awesome would that be?
Yeah.
And yeah, with that, again, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And just reach out to me if you want to get in touch with Joe. If you want to see a recording of this presentation, I'll be uploading it. And yeah, again, tell your friends about this course for next semester. All right, cool.
Bye, guys.
All right, thanks again, Joe. Take care.